Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world, and welcome back to Rebel, Reject, Create, the series of video interviews that I'm doing with highly creative people from all over the world, from all different kinds of disciplines. And today we're joined by Ms. Amy Shelver, who is also an escapee from the music industry like myself, and is on a mission to help 30 million plus creative workers around the world get better at business. But she's also a poet, she's worked for the UN, and my goodness me, I actually can't read this whole CV, otherwise this intro will go on way too long and everyone will click out of this video interview. So, hey, Amy, welcome to the show.
Hey, David, it's so great to be here and to be tapping into your audiences and yeah, to talk about creativity. I think one of my favorite topics of all time.
All right. When did you first start to think of yourself as being a creative person?
It's interesting, and the genesis of creativity is always, I think, quite personal to a lot of different people. If you're a musician or someone with a really great natural talent, I think you tap into it a little bit earlier. For me, it was writing, and I was always a writer or a scribbler. I fell in love with words on a Johannesburg library floor, reading the poems of the First World War and Second World War poets, these stories from these young men who are in love and missing their loved ones at home and their girlfriends. They were 18, 19 years old, some of them even younger than that. And I just remember the angst and the feeling and the connection and the history of that poetry. And I don't know, I think I was about 6 or 7 when this happened. And there was something in poetry that changed me.
Hmm.
And it's a wonderful form in that there is no right or wrong in poetry. Well, I suppose there could be something wrong, but needless to say, anyone can embrace poetry and write it. There's good and there's bad poetry, but there's no wrong poetry. And so, yeah, I was pretty young when I started to feel the nascent feeling of being a creative and using some kind of form of expression to make sense of the world.
Right. I want to pick up on something that you said there, which I personally find very interesting. You said, unless you've got some kind of natural talent, you might not tap into it. So, how do you see the kind of divide between talent or skills and creativity itself? Are those things the same thing or are they different?
I think most skills can be learned, but many people and the true creatives among us have an embedded talent that not everybody has. If they say that you can get, if you do something for 10,000 hours or more, you become an expert in it. And I've certainly felt this over my career, but I didn't walk into many of the creative pieces of work or the experiences that I had with a natural talent for the work that I was doing. I had the ability to slog it through and to put in the hours. And maybe that in itself is a different kind of talent.
Mhm.
But I don't have a voice, for example. I'm a little bit tone deaf, for example. I can, draw something beautiful that looks great to me and maybe my mother. But other than that, it's not going to fly off the walls of the moment.
Yeah.
And so there is a difference, I think, between talent, but skills can be learned. And not all of those that are talented take their talents and turn them into something profitable or something meaningful for themselves. It can sit latent with many people.
Hmm.
And so this is kind of the difference between, I think, a creative worker and someone who has creative talent.
All right. So maybe you can unpack for us a bit the journey from. I mean, you've been in a band where you've released an album. I know you've just released a very interesting multimedia poetry project, which we're going to talk a bit more about further. But but you're a business head. I mean, you've just come out of working for the UN. How does that work, and how do those two things sit next to each other in yourself, and also just as like if someone looks at it from the outside and goes, "Oh, I understand how that works now." How do you explain that?
We can choose to live multiple lives in the short lifetime that we have, and that's been an active choice that I've made, not to be completely one dimensional and to find succor and joy in experiencing the variety of myself and my own skills, and then the skills of other people. What drives me personally, and whether that's in a professional space or in my own personal space, or what I get the most reward from, is collaboration. And what's great about the creative industries and about creative people is that you really enjoy collaboration. It's a thing, you know. Creating alone is one thing, but when you add other people to the mix, there's magic to it. And it amplifies. And this is why people that are in a band, you know, a solo artist can go so far and have such a unique experience on their own. But when you come together as a group, you can actually create something far more fantastic. It doesn't mean you need to stay together or be together the whole time, or that your creative life is determined by the other people in the group. And so, yeah, essentially what I've done with my career is look for opportunities to collaborate, and that's academically, professionally, and in my own creative life. And in a way that explains my own career path, which has been in creative agencies, it's been in communications and PR, it's been in events, and then later on in digital and social media. And then also in all the collaborations I've had over my creative life. As you'll remember, many moons ago, I think getting close to 20 years ago, at my university in South Africa, I was the head of the Live Music Society, and I created this platform to help musicians from around the country perform in my university town. And so that was, again, all about collaboration. And the book that you've just mentioned, Onomatopoeia, which is a collection of my poetry over 20 years, but is also an ode to all the creatives that have participated in that whole experience through those 20 years. And so there are 100 artists that have responded to the poetry in that book. So again, it's about collaboration. And if I had to choose a true north about what I'm doing and what I want to do, it's to collaborate. And if professionally I get that, then that's what I pursue. If creatively that's what I get, then that's what I pursue. And even in love, I think I have the same approach.
Okay. So that's an approach, and that's pretty cool. And I mean, that's actually an aspect of creativity I probably don't talk about that much. But what about your methodology? I mean, it's one thing, okay, approaching it from that point of view, getting a team together, a band together, as it were. How do you ideate? How do you do what you do?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to, like, you know, really rationally break it into little building blocks.
Yeah, I know. And I think about this all the time, because I'm really, one of my big questions, one of the big things that keeps me up at night, and probably doesn't keep most people up at night, but it keeps me up at night, is how do you digitize creativity? And is it possible? And I think about this because we're becoming much more digital than we've ever been. And the trajectory is just going to suck us straight into a complete digital transformation. The fact that we can even do this speaks volumes about that. But we have a lot of change coming now with the fourth industrial revolution and digital transformation, the metaverse, the potential in Web 3.0 and NFTs. Yeah, and I think it's an amazing time, really. But one of the big things, and I think scientists across the world are debating this around artificial intelligence and frontier technologies, is when things get a little bit more nebulous, when you hit problem solving, when you hit creativity, when you hit the ability to collaborate, to ideate, and to think out of the box, that's where a lot of technology breaks down, because it's built on big data sets, and the data sets interact and produce certain outputs, but it's not necessarily the most creative or best solution to the problems. Of course, in many instances it is. So that's a slight deviation to say, yeah, I mean, this is just the way I think of the world, is really in a way of, you know, how do we take this powerful thing called creativity and digitize it? And so I've been interrogating my own process a little bit more than usual, because in that I would like to understand how different processes, procedures are where the potential for their digitization lies. So I don't know where creativity comes from. When I write a poem, I'm often struck by I'm moved by a powerful need to articulate something that's happening, or I see something, there's a trigger, and that moment will connect with 1,000 other moments and resonate with me, and then produce some kind of a beginning, a starting point, a spark, an idea. But often these ideas die on the vine, right? We don't do anything with them. And part of the creative process, I think, really is percolation and connection. And this is what I'm really focused on a lot at the moment, is finding, documenting those moments of inspiration, spark, where the ideas come from, figuring out how that percolation process works. And I don't know completely, but I do let things percolate. And then I think a creative life is about being open to triggers and experiences and being conscious of certain elements and how you see them, and then how they interact with idea and percolation processes. So it all sounds very nebulous, but there's always a spark, right? There's a creative moment. There's a stewing moment where you're thinking about that. And then there's other moments that connect to that. And you're either able to draw a direct line, or at a certain point when there's a trigger, you're able to pick up what you felt and seen in those other instances and turn it into something. And that's when the creative work starts. The first half is really just about percolation and allowing ideas to kind of flow, free flow. Then the next part is actually taking that creative work and turning it into something productive. It doesn't need to be profitable, but it needs to, it's essentially the making meaning of the creative inspiration. And I think in essence, that's where I've got to in understanding my process. I have a bit of a spark, it's wonderful. A phrase or a line will start popping up into my mind, and I may jot it down quickly. And then after a bit, come back to it and keep working on it. And ultimately it will start taking some kind of a shape. That's the writing process. But as you mentioned, I've also got a business hat, and I see the world really through maybe a little bit more of an economic lens. Then that's maybe my professional life that's coming into play. But humans are economic creatures. We've been trading since the beginning of time. It's driven us to move, it's driven us to connect, it's driven us to share culture, to trade, and to basically do what makes us human. And creativity is a major part of that. Furniture, wreaths, garlands, jewelry. The original money was seashells that had been shaped into something beautiful. So yeah, I don't want to harp on about the point, but I also tend to bring a business perspective to some of the ideas that I can see turning into either a product or a service.
I mean, the whole concept of value is a fantasy, right? It's just like, we're going to come up with this idea that this is worth so much, and it's only ever worth that much if a whole bunch of other people agree with you. There's nothing intrinsically valuable about that at all, is there?
Well, if you think about art, it's exactly the same thing.
Well, I was thinking about money, actually.
Exactly.
Yes.
Art and money have the exact same kind of correlation. And this is why there is such power in the NFT movement right now.
And this is why so many people just can't understand it, because they don't understand that cash money works on exactly the same principle, perceived value.
Yeah. So this is where the power of the creative and cultural economy really grabs hold. And it's where I think there's a lot of potential to expand our minds and the way we think about creativity, and also around trade and creativity, and trade and cultural services in particular, and cultural value, because that's the more obscure part of it. We know if we buy a piece of furniture or a cool pair of jeans or a CD or a book, if you still do that, that you're actually buying a product. Whereas, you know, we've shifted fundamentally now into a service where you're buying access, or you're buying a certain amount of value. And as a creative in this world, we have much more potential than ever to actually take hold of the inherent value in culture and creativity. And it's such an exciting time. really, to be creative and to put a business hat on that creativity. And I don't say that excluding art for art's sake, or the value in creating something beautiful just for yourself and for non-commercial gain.
Yeah. Thanks, Amy. That's a really cool perspective. And for all of you who are watching this, which is getting to a very interesting place, this conversation, please hit the like button. If you have a question for me or for Amy, or anything to say about the insights that Amy is sharing with us, please put them in the comments. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. This is just one in a series of interviews with highly creative people from all over the world. And so if you hit the subscribe button and set your settings so you get all the updates, then you won't miss another one of these particular interviews coming along. So Amy, I mean, I don't know about you, but because people think of me as a creative person, I often get people coming to me and saying, so, but I'm not creative. How can I be more creative? All right. So I'm going to give you, you're only allowed to say one thing. And what's the most important thing from your experience as a business and an art creative that anybody could do that's going to make them, I don't want to say make them more creative because I don't believe in that, but make them more capable of accessing their creativity? Ooh.
Get out there. 3 things.
One action. Words. That's one
3
thing.
words.
Okay.
One thing.
You're going to have to unpack that now, though. What do you mean by get out there?
You have to get out there and have an external stimuli in order to be able to comprehend and process and think about it, and then represent what you've seen or experienced in a way that feels creative to you. And I think that's the main thing, is you have to be out there having experiences. We are products of an environment that requires stimulus. And I think anyone can be super creative if you're open to stimulus.
Yeah, I like that. I kind of frame that thought. If creativity can be simplified to a process of joining the dots, if you want to be more creative, you've got to collect more dots.
I love it. And I play 2 dots, the game, regularly. So I'm really into connecting the dots. But yeah, there is something in that, David. Yeah, there's you have to be out there. You have to be collecting experiences and interpreting them. And it's often your perspective on that enables other people to perceive your work and be stimulated by your work. And so this kind of energetic flow moves.
Yeah. So the whole artist in the ivory tower, woe is me, with the hair shirt and the whip, like not seeing other people ever, is just what, bullshit?
I mean, I think those kind of artists are getting stimuli from other places. I mean, nowadays it's the internet. Before then it was philosophy or other people's arts, or even family. Like there can be negative stimuli too, experiences. And sometimes you take one experience and then you create around that, even if you just go deeply into that in perpetuity. And I think that's potentially what has happened to some of the greatest creatives of our time. Maybe not the greatest producers or the greatest business people of our time, but
awesome.
We're in a different world.
Yeah. Last question, Amy, about your poetry project. What is it? I mean, you've lightly touched on it, but now you can unload both barrels on us. What's it all about? Where can it be found? How on earth did it come into being? And why on earth release a poetry book in the 21st century?
I know, right? I ask myself this question all the time, on the precipice of actually releasing this book. All right. This was a personal project. It was nostalgic to the T. I basically wanted to create a tabula rasa. I wanted a clean slate of all my writing, but I couldn't let go of 20 years of creative scribbles and bits and pieces that I'd produced. And so I just thought, let me gather all my poems together, put them in one document. And I did, and they ended up being around 70 poems, 20 years. So I don't know, you can do the math on like 2.5 mediocre to good poems a year. That made it into the book. But as mentioned in the beginning, I'm a collaborator. And so I just started to think, like, had so much stimulus from all of my creative friends. A lot of the poetry that I wrote, I remember writing on the floor of my boyfriend's band room in Port Elizabeth, or walking the streets, engaging with people on a public art project, or witnessing something that was transformative or amazing, a lot of it driven by music and other people's art. And so I started to invite a couple of people to respond to my poems. And it actually escalated in such a powerful and meaningful and surprising way that what started as a nostalgic project has now turned out into full-on production, which is called Onomatopoeia. It's moments, observations, and poetry. It's my work plus 100 artists who have all responded to the poem that I sent them with a piece of their art. And so it's collaborative to the team. This is a process called anti-ekphrastic collaboration, which is a whole new kind of dimension, or not so new. Normally with art, writers respond to art, and that's a fantastic thing. And it's kind of like the main driving force of kind of ekphrastic collaboration, where writers look at something amazing, you see a Picasso, you see a Matisse, bam, and you write something in response to that. It's rare that artists respond to the written word, probably because there's so much written word compared to so much good art. And so this process also flips it on the head. But the project is much more than that, and it has a high potential to become a platform which matches artists and writers to continue this anti-ekphrastic collaboration. And so really what I've produced in true Amy fashion is the first collaboration and a prototype for a much bigger platform that helps artists and writers come together to collaborate. And we'll be producing a couple more books down the line. There's two in the making. So yeah, it's very cool. You can check it out at onomatopoeiapoetry.com.
All right, thanks, Amy. I'll be sharing all sorts of links to where you can get in touch with Amy and her work in the text here below the video, so check that out. Thank you, Amy, for having this chat with me, and thanks to you for listening and watching. I'd love to hear what your favorite insights from Amy were, so drop us a comment and tell us what really hit home for you. And of course, if you have any questions, you can also put them in there. I'll certainly be back to check on those and to try and answer you in any way. Please hit like on the video, and of course subscribe so you can catch the next videos in the series. And like I said, there'll be plenty of links for you to go and find Amy here in the description below the video. Ms. Amy Shelver, thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you so much, David, and thanks to everyone for listening. Yeah, reach out, connect, collaborate, create. Ciao.